Turkey Talk 102, Mouth Calling Madness. Here we are, back at it again with more Turkey Talk, but this time we have not one, but two special guests in studio. I'm Matt Drury, and this is another installment of Turkey Talk DoD TV. This segment of DoD TV is brought to you by PSE's Carbon Air Experience Performance. You all remember Billy Yargus from a few weeks back on our Turkey Talk 101, right? Well, if you don't, you may want to go check out that DoD TV segment because it was thebomb.com. He's a world championship caller. He's a national championship caller. He's a stud of all stud of turkey calling. Well, a few weeks back, he joined Mark Drury at the DoD studios, and he gave us a little long beard lecture. Say that 3 times. Without further ado, check out that beautiful turkey calling music.
All right, what a special day it is today. We've got Billy Yargus, the current Grand National and World Champion turkey caller, in the studio. And for this episode of DoD TV, we're going to talk all things turkey, from loads to strutting decoys to calling, whether it be friction or a mouth call, to tactics, setting up, you name it. But we're going to dive right into it right now with Billy. And a question we get often, Billy, is guys they struggle with that mouth call. They just can't get that down. They're not going to get call sounds like you, but they want to get as close as they can. So what do you tell a guy that's a beginning turkey caller and he's really struggling with that mouth call?
First thing, you need to get a call that is easy to use. That's the number one thing. And the second thing is you need to be able to figure out where to put that air on that call. It's like a musical instrument, and that's one of the big keys. Get the sounds you need, the high pitches and the low pitches, and be able to produce those turkey sounds.
So give me an example of that. You're going to run probably a cut and touch, right. I would think. So just a basic yelp, what's a guy got to do to get that down?
To get that down, you got to put a lot of tension on the call with your tongue on those reeds right at the beginning, and then once you begin to blow that high-pitched front end on that call, you want to get into the back end and make it break over. I drop my tongue just a little bit, dropping my jaw each time, because when you drop that, you allow that top reed to flutter and get the raspy sound of the back end on that yelp.
Take us through it on your cut and touch, if you would. Billy's taking it to a whole nother level. He and Matt Van Sice, they're literally the top 2 guys in the country. They have been for the past 5 or 6 years. But he's going to try and take you, if you're just getting started or if you're struggling a little bit, what you might do to make your sound a little better.
Sure. Get the high pitches. But to get raspier, put just a little more air to it, drop your jaw, drop your tongue just a touch, and allow that top reed to flutter. That'll help you sound more like a bird.
And I know, even at your level, if you took 10 different calls, you're going to get 10 drastically different sounds, one of which you're going to be, this is the one. And I'm talking 10 different top reed designs or total stack reed designs. What is a call that is generally the easiest one for a guy to capture right away and get a good sound out of it, the easiest call he can blow in that mad line?
In the mad line, I think the soft touch. It's just a double reed. It takes very little air. It's a split B, so it's easier to get the rasp in that calling. And it doesn't take hardly any pressure whatsoever with your tongue to be able to get the high pitches with only 2 reeds.
So the soft touch would be the call to start out on.
Absolutely.
And less air generally more rather than more air. Often I see guys blow that call and they're just all air. You really need a little less air to sound better, I think.
Sure, when you're walking in the hills, my gosh, you don't want to be blowing a call that's going to take an air tank to fill up before you go.
Exactly, you're exactly right. So let's go a little bit more advanced on the calling side. Now we're talking about the basic stuff. Go ahead and give me a routine or a rendition of some excited hen yelps. It's middle of the morning, you got a turkey working, you feel like he's in the right mood. How are you going to work that turkey?
We'll start off with a few clucks and then go into some plain yelps, and then once that gobbler gobbles at me, I want to explode with some cutting and then go on into some faster, more excited yelping. By doing that, you're telling that gobbler, I got very excited when I heard you gobble.
So you like to respond back to him and take it up a notch or two, try to put more excitement into it.
Sure, that's telling him something. You're having that conversation, and that gobbler, when he hears you and he hears that excitement in your voice, automatically, usually, he's going to gobble again and might be on his way at that point.
Okay, say that you do that, he answers back. How long are you going to wait then before you hit him again to check him to see if he's on his way or if he's still where he's at?
Right, feeling a turkey out, I mean, once he gobbles back at me, a lot of times what I do is I just shut up. And once he gobbles again, then I know he's looking for me, and that's exactly how you want it. You want that gobbler looking for you every time. Then I may tone it down a little bit and just give him a little bit, just to draw him in that extra.
So hit that, you know, you took it and you answered him and got him real excited. Then say 3 minutes pass and you're gonna check him a little bit, or he's gobbled on his own. How are you gonna respond back?
Say he gobbled on his own, I'm just gonna do more of a plain yelp. And that's about all I do. If he responds to that, just get your gun ready because he's probably on his way.
Yeah, unfortunately they don't all do that, you know.
No, not always.
Okay, same situation, you've done all that calling and the next time he gobbles, he's more distant. And then what are you gonna do?
Well, I'm gonna throw back on the excited hen yelp at him again and just see if I can get that level of excitement up. Because what you may run into is maybe a hen that's drawing him the other direction, because when you get aggressive to birds, a lot of times what's gonna happen is you get offensive to that hen. And she's like, we're not doing this. And she'll turn around and she'll walk away.
So you're gonna hit him harder then at that point?
I'm gonna hit him hard right then. And if he continues to walk away and gobble, it's time to move.
Hit him one time for me, as hard as you can. At that point, you're trying to find out, are we going to do this or not?
Right. Test him a little bit. See how excited he is at this point.
So if at that point he answers you back, you're going to sit there and wait. I think sometimes guys get a little impatient because you mentioned moving, which I move a lot. However, the longer I hunt, the older I get, the less I move and the more patience I give that bird until I'm really convinced he's just not coming to me. Then I'm going to try and get up and tactically get in a place where he's more comfortable in coming into.
Sure, I'll wait on him a lot of times, and I want to hear him gobble on his own. If he gobbles on his own, he's still interested in you, but if he isn't getting any closer, as long as he isn't moving away, I'll set it out for a little bit. But once he starts to move away again, then I'm going to get up and I'm going to relocate.
I think one of the turkeys that can throw you for a curve, we're talking about birds that are gobbling on their own and answering your call, it's that turkey that's been gobbling and then all of a sudden he shuts up altogether, because I've seen that go both ways. I've seen him shut up because he's got hens and he won't gobble again the rest of the day. I've also seen him shut up and march straight into your position because he thinks he's got a hen when he's coming to you. So how do you play that scenario?
That's when you need to be patient.
Yes,
you need to sit there and give this bird plenty. I'd say I usually give him 30 to 40 minutes of just sitting there solid and just give some plain yelps, just real soft stuff like I was doing a minute ago, just some plain yelps, maybe a cluck and purr once in a while, just to see if maybe he will give you a little gobble or indication where he's at, but be listening for that drumming and spitting and drumming.
That cluck and purr, you talk about that. That's a call that I use probably more sparingly than most of my calling, but I don't do it as well as you do. Give them an example and also talk about how you're doing that cluck and purr.
I do it, there's two different ways. If I'm using our killer touch, which is a double reed bat wing, I'll use it by fluttering my tongue, by going trrrr. If I'm using my cutting touch, what I'll do is I'll flutter that ugula in the back of your throat by just kind of gurgling. It'll sound like this. By doing that and all that soft stuff, a lot of times that'll seal that deal for us.
And I think turkey hunting is so tactical, and I always say you're only as good as the amount of times you've been in that situation before. In other words, turkeys can do a lot of different things. Like I was just talking about, they could go quiet and be walking away and you never hear them again, or they could be quiet and coming your direction. So it's really reading that bird, what mood he was in prior to going quiet on you, and trying to adjust based on what mood you think that turkey's in, because every turkey's got a different mood. And sometimes that's weather dependent, sometimes it's time of the year dependent, depends how many hens he's got or doesn't have. For you, what is the most challenging time of the year when you're out there and you're having the toughest time killing a turkey? When is that, say, in Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, here in the Midwest?
Here in Missouri, in our home state, usually later in the season. And a lot of people think that's due to people calling the turkeys, you know, on hunting pressure and things like that. A lot of times it is. A lot of times it's just they're winding down. There's not as many hens, or they could be henned up. I mean, it can go either way. A lot of times calling in the hens will help you out. But I find birds a lot of times that they don't want to respond. I mean, they're out there and they're gobbling their heads off, they're strutting, and they don't have a hen with them, and they won't come to you because every time they go to a hen, there's a gobbler there waiting on them to kick them in the head.
It's amazing how you can go through the season, and if you're in the early part of the season, say the first 10 days of April in the Midwest. Now this is a sliding scale depending on whether you're up north or whether you're down south, but here in the Midwest, first 10 days of April, man, you can go out there and bang 2 sticks together and kill a turkey because they're very responsive, and all the birds in the flock are gobbling. That's the other thing that I noticed. There's a lot of gobbling out there with all the young birds, the 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, it doesn't matter. As you get into the middle part of April and they start into that peak of their breeding, all of a sudden the gobbling gets a little bit less. They may do it on the limb, and then you may not hear them again the rest of the day. And then to your point, later in the season, you know, late April or on into May, they get quite tough because they're just not very talkative. However, you're still able to go out there and kill a turkey, but to me, it's more tactical. You got to find them. You got to remember where you've worked birds in the past, and you got to use your woodsmanship a little bit more than you do your calling skills. Those are the times of the year you can still kill a turkey, but you got to know where the turkey's at if he's not calling to you. Early part of the season is my favorite. I don't know about you.
Oh yeah, definitely. You know, one of the things we got to realize is early in the season, that pecking order isn't established 100%. So you got your young birds and your dominant birds wanting to come to hens. They're wanting to, you know, get in there on that breeding part of it. But later on in the season, once that pecking order is lined out, you got your insubordinate gobblers that may run the other direction every time that they hear a hen calling because there's a gobbler with them. And then you have the dominant gobblers, once they start losing their hens, that's when things open up, and that's when you'll kill those 1.5-inch hooked birds.
You kill a lot of those, probably.
Not a lot of them.
I wish they all had 1.5-inch
Yeah,
spurs. I
that'd be
wish
nice.
every deer grew 170 inches of antler, but they don't. So let's talk a little bit about, break that season down a little bit. First 10 days, give me a normal calling scenario. You've got a lot of birds, they're still a little flocky, and there's a lot of gobbling, a lot of that pecking order starting to be established. Are you going to call more or less in that situation?
In that situation, early in the season, I'll call more, just because you can get by with it. I mean, you can talk to the birds and they'll talk back, and you can do plain yelps or you can do excited hen yelps, whatever you want to do, cluck and purr, and get more of a flock talk. And a lot of times I use 2 different calls a lot of times.
Give me an example of that.
Just a flock talk.
Early season, and you're really hammering a bird, and you got a bunch of birds gobbling all around you. The ideal situation, it's 7:30, they just flew down, and you got 5 different gobblers within 200 yards, and you can hear hens yelping all over the place.
Right. I'm going to try and sound like maybe 2 to 3 different hens, doing some softer yelps, doing some louder yelps, and maybe doing 2 different kinds of yelps.
Now, I noticed there your mouth position changed to get those 2 different sounds.
Right.
One of them, you were letting all the sound out a little higher pitch, and then you muffled it by giving more air pocket in your mouth, didn't you?
Right. That makes it a little bit deeper, trying to sound more like an older hen. And it's amazing how well that will work because you never know what's going to hit a gobbler's ear, whether it's going to be that high-pitched younger hen or whether it's going to be that deeper, older hen that some people might even mistake even for a jake.
Do you ever sit in that time of the year, the early part of April, and think, man, I'm just calling too much, and everything all of a sudden, you got 5 turkeys gobbling, and all of a sudden things shut down about 8:30, and you think, I called too much, I don't have a turkey standing in front of me, what did I do wrong? In that situation, how do you react then? About 8:30, 9 o'clock, everything shut up, you don't have a bird that came into you.
That's where your scouting comes in, I believe, where you was talking about earlier about you need to know where their strut zones are, where they're feeding, where they're getting their water from, where they're roosting. You need to know all these different things, where the birds are hanging out. If you can do that homework and use your woodmanship at that point and go to where the strutting zone is and slip in there and get set up, maybe stick a decoy out in front of you, then set tight. I mean, hour and a half, 2 hours, and see what happens. If nothing happens, then get up and make another move. Maybe to another place where you know the birds are setting up, setting in the middle of the day, and find dusting bowls and things like that around the edge of the field. And a lot of times, just because they're not gobbling, that doesn't mean they're gone or they're not there. You just keep listening for that spitting and drumming, or maybe a real light hen yelp, because they'll be slipping in there on you.
One of the best pieces of advice I ever received from a really, really unbelievable turkey hunter, and this goes back to the 80s when I first started calling. This was probably 83, 84, and at the time, I was good friends with Joe Sexar, Paul Sexar, still am today, but Paul and Joe were the turkey hunters in St. John County. I mean, they killed birds when nobody else was killing them. And Paul always talked about every step he took, every second of the day, every move he made, he pretended in his mind or addressed the situation as if he was about to kill one at any second. In other words, don't let your guard down. Always be ready to kill one. And I think that really it holds to that point of the day where you're talking about, because just because they shut up doesn't mean you don't have one's attention, because he'll remember where he heard all that calling, that loudmouth hen. If he ends up not having a hen from the original fly down, he's liable to just come slipping in, pecking and feeding. Time doesn't mean anything to turkeys. That was another good piece of advice my Uncle Marvin gave me. Time means nothing to them. It means everything to us, especially this day and age where we're worried about checking social media, or we got an appointment, or you got to make a phone call. Turkeys don't have to have a schedule. So you got to remember those two things. Number one, time doesn't mean anything. And number two, you're liable to kill a turkey at any second of the day. So make sure you're always on top of your game.
Absolutely. I mean, it can happen at any time, and that's the thing about hunting. I think that's why we continue to do it, and why we get so obsessed with it, is because you never know exactly what's going to happen, and you never know when it's going to change. From 1 second, there is nothing. For 1 second or 2 hours, you don't hear a gobble, you don't hear a yelp. It's like there is no turkeys in this woods, and then all of a sudden, within 30 seconds, that can all change, and you got a gobbler strutting right at you. You can hear him drumming, even though you can't see him, and you know he's coming. You just can't even get your gun up at that point, because you're not 100% sure that he can't see you. But that's what gets your adrenaline flowing, and that's what keeps you going by.
And I think that's one of the cool things, of the allures that draws people into turkey hunting, is you're always in the game. You're never really out of the game. You may think you're out of the game, but if there's turkeys in the area and you've done your scouting, you're always in the game, because it could change on an instant. We talk about it, we're out there hunting. There's that quiet period from about 8 to 10:30 or 8:30 to 11, somewhere in there, they get a little quiet, and then all of a sudden they start to lose those hens for a lot of different reasons, and then all of a sudden you find yourself back in the game, and you can kill that turkey. Like you said, you may go 2 or 3 days and not have a turkey work, and then all of a sudden you can have the best hunt of the year unfold when you've just been on a real losing streak because you're not into any birds. Then all of a sudden you're liable to kill 2 or 3 in a row. There's a lot of numbers involved, and it also goes to the weather that particular day. I've noticed that, whether it's early season, mid-season, late season, you're only as good as the weather. There's certain days, much like deer, where they're going to play the game, and other days where they're not. What weather do you look for to have that ultimate turkey hunting day?
The temperature doesn't really seem to play a part in it. I think more of the clear skies, the less wind seems to be better, and barometer. I mean, whether that barometer is high or whether it's low, a lot of times depends on whether the turkeys are going to be gobbling very much or be very active. But for me, I like to watch the clear skies. That's one of the big things, and then less wind. And it's not that you can't kill them in the wind, but I just like it a little bit better. You can hear better, and I think the birds are more active then.
I think, to your point, those calm wind days, you can hear those turkeys and you can go to them. On a windy day, how often have you been there when the wind's under 10 and you hear a turkey way off in the distance? You go, yesterday I wouldn't have heard that turkey because we had a 15-mile-an-hour wind. And because you heard him, you were able to get on him and have a good setup and kill the turkey. I mean, I'm with you on the calm winds. Another time that I like is when a front's just approaching. And Terry and I have noticed this through the years. Those clouds are starting to roll in. There might be a little rain front. And I think there's a difference between those high bluebird days where the hens are off their nest, they're very active. Sometimes those turkeys get tough middle part of the day on bluebird days. But on those fronty days, I think those hens have a tendency to stay a little closer to their nest and tend to them, and you up your odds for finding a turkey that's not with the hen. Although they may not be gobbling as much because the weather's not a good gobbling day, we have a lot of turkeys come to a call on those days where a front's just approaching. We've killed a lot of turkeys in that situation. Let's transfer forward into the middle part of the month. It's mid-April. They're all henned up. Every turkey you see's got 4 or 5 hens with him. What are you going to do specifically in that time of the year, which hits a lot of turkey seasons, when they're in the peak of breeding? What are you going to do to kill a turkey in that situation?
A lot of times what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to move around quite a bit and find the right bird. Maybe find one that doesn't have any hens. If you're hunting birds with hens, the best thing I can say is put a good decoy set up out in the field where you know the birds are staying around there, and you might play on their jealousy side. You might throw a gobble at them or something and try to get their jealousy up, or do a little fight. A lot of times doing that fight will draw that bird in and away from his hens. If you can't get those hens to come to you, if you put on a little fight, a lot of times that'll get his jealousy up and like, whoa, we ain't having this. You know, he'll come over and settle up pretty quick.
Specifically, what decoy setup do you go with during the middle part of the peak of the breeding?
I like to have a full strut gobbler and one hen myself. Sometimes I'll use 2 hens and lay one on the ground for a breeding position, you know. And a lot of times when the dominant bird sees that, I mean, he's running.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, transfer to the latter part of the season. They're starting to lose their hens. What tactics are you using then that differ to the middle part and the early part? They're starting to get a little bit more vocal when you actually get on a turkey that's without his hens.
I like to try to keep it a little bit softer and try to yelp to them with that plain yelp. A lot of times softer the better, to try to get that bird to come to you. And once he does fire up and gobbling, you know he's talking to you. You might jump on that excited hen yelp, just a short series of excited hen yelps, just to let him know that you're very interested, and then back off like we was talking before. You know, just back off a little bit. You might do some flock talk and just keep his interest up.
Are you covering more ground during that period, or do you try to stay stationary? I guess it depends how much dirt you're working with, probably.
That has a lot to do with it. You know, how much ground you have. I do a lot of blind calling, and I do this early and I do it later. Early in the season, a lot of times I do more run and gun, but later on in the season, middle season, and especially late in the season, I do what I call a lot of blind calling. I go in, I set up for about 30 minutes. I do start off with some soft yelps, and then I will escalate that on up into some more some excited hen yelps or some lost type yelps, and just looking, because the whole time a turkey's talking, they're looking to have a conversation or looking for a response. So you need to be listening. When you do those loud calls, I mean, you just do them in short series and try to get it to where if he does respond, you can hear him. Once he does respond, then I explode on him and then back off again.
To me, it goes back to a point you made earlier, the pecking order. Early in the season, they're trying to establish it. Middle part of the season, peak of the breeding. By the time you get to the latter part of the season, the pecking order is set. And there's a lot of turkeys, 2-year-olds especially, that may have been gobbling the first week of April, that now all of a sudden it's May 1st and they're not opening their mouth, yet that you can still kill those turkeys.
Yeah, that's when you really have to set tight. I mean, those birds, a lot of times, just doing some soft yelping, don't draw a lot of attention to yourself, basically. That gobbler, that 2-year-old that you haven't been able to kill because that dominant bird keeps coming in there and kicking him. What you can do then is just maybe just use 1 or 2 hens and no gobblers whatsoever, do some soft yelping and just watch them. I've had this happen before, and watch them out in the field, and you can tell they keep looking over your way every time you call, and they won't gobble, and they're not even strutting, and they just keep looking up like, you know they're interested. You know they're scared to come over there because they're scared a big gobbler's gonna come out of them woods. But if you sit there long enough, he'll peck his way over, and then pretty soon, I've watched them with it, when they get about 50 yards and they're looking around, they're like, he ain't here. Then the fan comes up and it's like, okay, let's do this.
Let's get it on.
That's right.
Now, to wrap this thing up, I want to do some calling, and I'm going to do it on a handheld friction call. You're going to do it on a mouth call. Let's just go through all the different calls and try and give an example for someone to practice to, so where they can play it back, listen to it, and hone their skills in. Let's start with just simple clucks. You go first, and then I'll hit it as well. All right, let's transition into tree yelping. Soft yelping, you want to open that conversation up. I always talk about talking to a turkey. You want to start on the lowest rung of the ladder and work your way up and find out where your sweet spot is. In other words, if he'll answer you when you're down here, keep working him down here. Save those chips for later in the conversation. Sure. Let's start real low on the lowest rung, some tree yelps. You hear Billy giving that different sound like he did earlier. Changing your mouth position, you can do the same thing with a friction call by being out on the outer edge for your higher pitch. Still get the turnover, but if you go to the dead center, totally different sound. Same call, two different turkeys. All right, now let's take it up just a little bit. Fly down cackle. You're on the limb, you've done some tree yelping, you've done some clucks. It's time to fly down to the ground.
And one of the things about a fly down cackle, Mark, is I've envisioned hens, and that's the whole thing whenever you're calling. You want to envision that you're that hen, but she's looking around on the ground, looking for a safe travel to the ground. And that's one of the things I do. I can start off with those little soft clucks like a hen starting to get excited, like I'm getting ready to do it, and then all of a sudden she explodes.
So she's soft, on the way down, she pop, 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 pop. And then a lot of times she'll shut up, sometimes she keeps on yelping.
Right.
It's much more difficult to do on a friction call. It's very difficult to do because you don't have that control of your mouth to do that down. You have to work on that to get it. All right, you're on the ground. First hen yelp you're gonna give him. You're gonna wait a little bit, and there's often a hush time early in the morning. When they fly down, it's kind of a nervous time for them, and I've noticed that first 5 to 10 minutes when their feet first hit the ground, everything shuts up. The gobblers, the hens, everything. And then about 10, 15 minutes later, they'll start to talk a little bit. Go ahead and give us some nice yelps then once you're first on the ground. And on a friction call, yelping is probably the standard call you're going to use any time of the day. But something that I have a lot of turkeys answer to, and it's something good to practice, and that's cutting. A hen is at her peak of excitement when she's out there cutting. Give us some examples of cutting.
Cutting, and one thing to realize, Mark, when you're cutting is a turkey is always listening. So that's why they break it up. They have that broke up rhythm. So the whole time that you're cutting, you're listening. And it can help you, if you do the same thing a hen does, it can help you to hear that bird. So just cutting, I might put a short series of yelps in it just to try and make it more realistic.
Something I try to do, whether it's a box call, mouth call, or friction call, I try to hit that high pitch cut. I want that tone to travel farther, travel faster, and I want to make sure that gobbler knows that I'm really excited when I hit that cutting. So I try to be high pitched. If you contrast that with the middle part of the call, two different hens. but I can tell you which one he's going to answer, and that's that high-pitched cutting, and I'm sure you do the same thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, cluck and purr, soft stuff. He's working his way in, you've struck him, you know he's coming, you're going to tone it down just a little bit. Cluck and purr. And on a friction call, and then to soften it up even more. I always like to throw those yelps back in there too. I think it makes it so much more realistic to add to your cluck and purr with those soft yelps.
That's a killer.
It is a killer. I'm not going to do it on this friction call, but how about a Kicky run for a locator call? Do you ever do that in the spring just to change things up a little bit, give them a different sound, hit them with a bit of a Kicky like a young immature hen might do?
Yeah, I was hunting in Kansas one time, and I actually had a hen start doing a Kicky run. We had 7 hens in the field, and they all grouped to her. I started doing a Kicky run and drew all those hens right into me, and I already had 3 hen decoys and a gobbler decoy. Let me tell you something, when those 2 gobblers come out in the field, they come running. So all I did was it's a high-pitched whistle with a few yelps on the end of it.
And you're doing that with a cut and touch, so your tongue is over in the cutout part of the call, I assume, for the whistle, and then dropping back for the yelp.
Yeah, what I'm doing is I'm holding that top reed from fluttering. That's the whole thing, is get your tongue up into that call where that top reed quits fluttering and get the high pitch, right like you said, right on them 2 reeds, and then move your tongue back and get the raspier yelps out of it.
Awesome. So that's a fairly in-depth look at turkey hunting and turkey calling. We haven't talked about decoying that much. We haven't talked about shotgun size or shells or chokes or anything like that, but I think we covered quite a bit of ground here today. Billy, is there anything else you want to add that we didn't cover, something that people ask all the time?
Not really. I mean, I think we've covered pretty much everything.
We covered it fairly thoroughly. So we appreciate everybody sticking in there for this turkey calling seminar here on DoD TV. Everybody have a safe spring season out there, and best of luck from everybody at Drury Outdoors.
Excellent advice, gentlemen. All right, YouTubers, you have your pen and paper, you have your notes. Now it's time to go out in the field and put all those turkey talking to good use. We hope everybody has a safe and successful turkey season. Remember, hunt safe, identify your target, and until next time, check out more DoD TVs right here on the Drury Outdoors YouTube channel.